Good afternoon, it's June 27th. This is to my liberal friends. Have you ever watched a poker game on television? You know that the game requires a certain amount of luck and a lot of nerve. A player has to decide when to make his big push by going all in. He will either put himself in the position to win or he'll be out of the game. Well, Joe Biden is making that kind of bet right now. He's pushing all of his political chips into the center of the table, and he may lose it all. This week, the White House made that decision by claiming credit for the nation's post-pandemic resurgence, and they've given it a name, Biden Economics. Tomorrow, Biden will give a speech outlining his economic case. He will try to convince voters that he is the man to lead the nation and restore the economic growth that everyone wants. He will be more than likely announce that he will bring forth several key efforts, including bolstering manufacturing investments, expanding high-speed internet access for all, and as he goes for the juggler, he will say he will be cracking down on industries and their so-called junk fees. Read that, airlines and some of their charges and hotels. If you don't think this is high risk, you've not been paying attention. Since Biden took office, we have seen inflation soar to high numbers, peaking at just around 9%. We've seen the Federal Reserve try to tame that inflation by raising interest rates again and again. This has resulted in tamping down price increases somewhat, but inflation still hovers in the 4% range, and Biden hopes you forget that it was 1.4% when he took office. Now, this announcement has not been met with rousing cheers from many key Democratic strategists, and it runs the risk of tainting every Democrat on the ticket in 2024 with an economic failure. As one strategist said, quote, Bidenomics sounds like bad math. It sounds like when my parents tell me something costs $2, in reality it costs $20, end quote. That strategy is correct, in my opinion. Wages have not kept up with inflation, and it's only in recent months where they've equaled inflation. Biden wants you to forget that his real economy has been. Inflation, as I said, was at 1.4% when he took office and soared to 9% before coming down, and it's still just over 4%. Gasoline was at $2.35 a gallon when he took office and reached an all-time high of close to $5 a gallon before tapering off. The national debt has increased by $7.1 trillion in just 4 years, and that would be $1.5 trillion more than Trump did in his whole 4 years. And most of that in Trump's came from emergency COVID spending in 2020. If Biden's 2024 budget proposal actually passed, he would add as much to the national debt as Trump and Bush 43 combined. Now, House Republican leaders have made it clear that budget's not going anywhere, but it illustrates just how out of control Biden's spending policies really are. In dealing with the debt and deficit, President Biden has had the advantage of a 43% increase in federal tax receipts from 2020 to 2022, and he can thank the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act for those increases. In 2020, federal income tax revenues were $3.4 trillion. In 2022, they increased to a record $4.8 trillion. Revenues from both individual income taxes and corporate taxes were the highest they've ever been. Individual income tax revenues were over $2 trillion in 2021 and 2022 for the first time, a 64% increase in 2022 over 2020. Contrary to Biden's constant complaint that businesses don't pay its fair share, revenues from corporate income taxes in 22 were over $400 billion. Also, for the first time, an increase of 101% over 2020. Biden's own proposed 2024 budget would be 55% higher than Trump's spending in 2019, and his budget projections are even more alarming. His 2024 proposed budget has spending that will reach the $7 trillion threshold in 2025, $8 trillion in 28, $9 trillion in 31, and $10 trillion in 33. That's right, $10 trillion we will be spending if this goes unchecked. One of Joe Biden's favorite lines is how he reduced the annual deficit by $1.7 trillion. But then he forgets that he raised the deficit so high with his proliferate spending during COVID that it could only come down. It could not continue to stay at the rate it was. Biden used the pandemic as a shield for a massive increase in government spending, and that, ladies and gentlemen, was the primary cause of runaway inflation that has hit all of us so hard in our pocketbooks. So I would suggest that when you hear Joe Biden talk about Bidenomics, you should be asking how we got in this position in the first place. You should be asking why he continues to recommend huge spending programs. When Speaker McCarthy negotiated with Biden to increase the debt ceiling, he was doing so with one hand tied behind his back, and yet he was able to force some major concessions that Biden would not normally agree to. Gone are the massive omnibus bills at the end of the year that allow politicians to hide their pet programs that cost all of us billions and billions. Now Congress will have to pass all the appropriations bills individually. We'll actually be able to understand what's in them. And if you're truly interested in getting rid of deficits, then I would suggest you elect a Republican Senate. With the budget hawks currently in the House of Representatives, they would then have to cut spending. And it's not easy, and everyone has their pet program they want to keep. But we're at a point where everyone will have to sacrifice to get this spending problem under control. And when somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says we can pay for everything by just increasing taxes on high earners while saying we have to break the mistaken idea that taxes pay for 100% of government expenditures, she argued for a, quote, combination of taxes and deficit spending, essentially saying it's worth increasing the deficit if an idea might actually pay for itself through job creation later on. She also said that lawmakers could regulate inflation with strategic taxes down the line. She's in dreamland. And that should tell you that both she and Biden are living in a dream world and that Biden economics are part of that dream. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, hit the subscribe button, recommend it to your friends, and if you have a comment, I'd like to hear from you. Thanks for listening.